Hey guys, so it is no secret by now that I play the Pokemon TCG, and this weekend I'm going to be in Ohio competing in the International Tournament. Figured I'd make a short video letting you guys know what some of the best decks are in the format and talk a little bit about what my deck's all about. Without getting into too many details, the metagame basically devolves into a game of rock, paper, scissors. There's like a triangle meta going on. The strongest deck in the format right now is Buzzwole. Buzzwole is an Ultra Beast Pokemon from the Gen 7 games, so you might not be too familiar with it. It's a fighting type, and what makes it so good in the TCG is that it's just ridiculously powerful. All you have to do is attach one energy to it, and with bench support from other Pokemon, and attached items, and strong energy, and all sorts of things, it's just an unstoppable force. It just gets super strong, really fast, and it can be very hard to deal with. And because it can get so powerful in the early game, it can secure some very early knockout wins, which is, unfortunate for the people that lose against them, because it kind of sucks. But because of its blinding power, Buzzwole is definitely on the top of the meta. To try to balance out Buzzwole's power, it is weak to Psychic-type Pokemon. For this reason, Malamar decks are another piece of the puzzle in that triangle meta. Malamar is a when did Malamar come out? Malamar is a Gen 6 Pokemon, a dark psychic type, and in the TCG game it is a psychic type Pokemon. What makes Malamar so special is that it has energy acceleration. In the TCG, you are limited to attaching only one energy card per turn unless a card says that you can do otherwise. Malamar says you can do otherwise. Yeah, it can attach psychic energy from the discard pile onto Pokemon onto the bench. So Malamar decks pair this with high-powered psychic-type Pokemon such as Necrozma, Ultra Necrozma, Dawnwing's Necrozma, Mew, Mewtwo, and Mimikyu. What makes this deck so strong is that even against decks that it's weak to, the high damage it can get off from this energy acceleration can allow it to overcome the opposition. However, this deck isn't a shoo-in against Buzzwole either because Buzzwole has intense intense strength early on in the game and throughout the game. So, pretty intense matchup, both very good decks. Now the decks that are strong against the Malamar decks are Zoroark decks. Zoroark is a Gen 5 Pokemon, Dark type, and what makes it so good in the TCG is that it gives the player control over their draws. It's got this ability trade, you discard a card, and you draw 2 cards. When you got multiple Zoroarks set up, it allows you to basically search out what cards you need from your deck in a pinch. On top of that, Zoroark can pretty easily hit for 120 damage right on turn 2 of the game, which can give it that early game devastating power, much like Buzzwole has. On top of that, Zoroark is a dark type Pokemon, so it resists the psychic type attacks that the squids are thrown at it. Now the biggest problem that Zoroark has in this format is that Buzzwole is the best deck. Any matchup with Zoroark against Buzzwole is probably going to be a losing matchup for Zoroark. If you think about it, it could be argued that Buzzwole decks are so good because Buzzwole has a pretty even matchup against Malamar decks, and Malamar decks have a poor matchup against Zoroark decks, and Zoroark decks have an absolutely poor matchup against Buzzwole decks. So if you math it out, more often than not, the Buzzwole decks are going to be coming out on top. Now, there are decks that break this triangle format and, go outside of the box. One such deck is Greninja Break. Actually, Greninja Break was run by Jake, who goes to the same card shop I do. He took 3rd at the Madison Regional Tournament, and the advantage Greninja Break has is once it has its combo up, which lets you do damage to any of your opponent's Pokemon and rotate this damage and then hit them really heavy. It's kind of a convoluted setup, which is why Greninja Break isn't like a top best in deck format like the other 3 decks are. But Greninja Break is really powerful once it gets going. Yeah, pretty great deck there. And then we have the deck that I run, which is kind of existing outside of the triangle there, and that is Espeon-Garbodor, also known as Espegarb. The main power of Espegarb comes from Garbodor, the Garbotoxin Garbodor. Garbotoxin makes it so that it shuts down my opponent's abilities. So a Zoroark can't use trade, The Malamars can't use their energy acceleration, and any support that the Buzzwole has is basically cut off. All the Pokemon in an Espeon-GX deck, for the most part, are Psychic type, so that further improves my matchup against Buzzwole decks. Now, it's not all on the Garbatox and Garbodor. There is a second Garbodor in this mix, and that is the Trash Lance Garbodor. I hope I said that right. Trash Lance. Yeah, the Trash Lance Garbodor. What Trash Lance does is it gets more powerful the more item cards my opponents use. So it can make it very tricky for my opponent to play item cards because they'll be fearful of powering up my Garbodor. And in the late game, it basically allows me to Trash Lance, OHKO, anything that comes in my way, assuming that my opponent played enough item cards. And given the format, they're going to play enough item cards eventually. So, yeah, y'all better watch out, man. Now, this Trash Lance Garbodor has a late game pressure. The early game pressure comes from Espeon. With a single psychic attachment, it can hit for 30 and confuse things. If I can get a double colorless energy on it, then I can bust out the all-powerful Divide-GX, which can really break someone's setup early game. Now, this all sounds excellent on paper, but in practice, it can be a bit clunky, which is why Espegarb is not a triangle best in format type of deck. A lot of my advantage over my opponents lies in my ability to keep Garbatoxin up. For a Garbatoxin to be active, I have to have an item card attached to the Garbodor. So if my opponent has a way to remove that item, then for that one turn, until I get an item card back on it, they are able to use their abilities again. And usually it's that one turn where they can swing the matchup in their favor. If I can't recover from that, then I'm kind of screwed. Another disadvantage my deck has is that in the early game, basically all of my damage comes from Espeon. If they take out my Espeon faster than I'd like them to, or they somehow stop me from doing Divide-GX early on, then I kind of lose the early game advantage, and I'm trying to play catch up with my Garbodors, hoping that they drop those item cards and get me rolling, right? A way that I circumvent this issue is by also running Drampa in the deck. Drampa is a Gen 7 Dragon Normal type Pokemon, and in the TCG it is a Normal type Pokemon. It's got this attack called Righteous Edge, which can knock off special energy cards from my opponents. So against a Zoroark deck, where I kind of have a disadvantage, and they can get a huge advantage from that one turn of me not having Garbatoxin up, I can kind of screw with them a bit with Drampa. And because all the Pokemon in this deck are weak to Psychic type damage, Drampa helps even the odds a little bit against Malamar decks. It doesn't really do a whole lot for me against Buzzwole because it's weak to Buzzwole, but the entirety of my deck is pretty strong against Buzzwole, so not too concerned there. And if you're curious about my matchup against Greninja Break, yeah, Greninja Break just does not win against my deck. If I get Garbatoxin up, that one turn of no Garbatoxin isn't really going to do a whole lot to me. It's a huge struggle for Greninja Break to get past my deck, so yeah. But Greninja Break really isn't out there that much, so the decks I'm going to be facing more often are going to be the meta decks. But yeah, overall the deck is really great, and it does do well in most tournaments. The biggest flaw I'd have to say with it is that it does have that good against everything, but everything is also good against it scenario going on, where a Buzzwole deck will just Raffle Stomp a Zoroark all the time, and will kind of have trouble with a Malamar deck. My deck doesn't really Raffle Stomp much, and doesn't have a supreme advantage over much either. So every matchup I'm going into, it's kind of a roll of the dice who's going to win, where Buzzwole knows it's going to win against Zoroark, and then is going to tango with Malamar. For that reason, I don't think I'm going to be taking first at this tournament. I'll actually be pretty surprised if I make it to day 2. I mean, the odds are there. We're just going to have to see how it plays out. So yeah, so that is the deck I'm running for the Pokemon TCG. If you're curious why I got involved with the Pokemon TCG, it was literally because I found out that Garbodor was a top kind of meta-viable Pokemon for the format. And being a pile of trash, it is one of my most favorite Pokemon. And my buddy Dave runs a card shop called Gametown in Waukesha, and I made a post on Facebook about it. And he's like, come on to the card shop, man. We can build you an Espegarb deck. It's going to be great. And so we did. And here I am. So yeah, the most important thing to do with any Pokemon game is to have fun and, use the Pokemon you want to use, but also be mindful of that metagame so, you don't get butthurt when you get smashed all the time, right? One thing that's really cool about the Pokemon TCG metagame compared to like Magic and Yu-Gi-Oh! Is that it has a very low overhead cost. The TLDR of that is that the Pokemon company sees the TCG as a derivative product of their main product, which is, the Pokemon video games. Because of that, given the rarity distribution of cards and like the metagame and what they put in tins and stuff like that, the game is like basically kept cheap by the company. Another way to think of it is that games like Magic and Yu-Gi-Oh! The cards are more exclusive and more rare and therefore more expensive because of the company's business model for the card game. Like Magic and Yu-Gi-Oh! All they have is like Magic and Yu-Gi-Oh! To make money from. Of course they want their cards to be expensive. But for Pokemon, yeah, Pokemon Company don't care. I mean, they're going to make money anyways, so why make it super expensive and hard for people to play? Another way of looking at it is that playing the Pokemon TCG promotes their IP of Pokemon altogether. So, yeah, I don't know, very friendly game. If you want to get involved with it, I say go to your local card shop and talk to people there, get sorted out, and go onto the Pokemon TCG Reddit. The format kind of rolls over every September, so some cards that are good now that might be expensive right now might not be available for standard play after September. So I'd say get educated on all that, which your local players and the Reddits will be very good at helping you navigate, so you don't make any poor investments trying to dive in on this. But yeah, overall, pretty cheap game, very fun. I'm going to have a blast, so let's see how that goes. If you'd like some more details on my deck or to see some gameplay of Ryan Swag in action, then subscribe to SwagTips. I plan on putting out a video of just that very soon. And if you have any questions about the Pokemon TCG, or if you're a Pokemon TCG master and you feel I got some things wrong, then comment below, let me know your questions, I'll be happy to answer. And if you're going to school me, then school me, because hey man, I want to learn how to play this game well too, right? Take it easy, guys. SwagTips. And if you're curious, no, I have not abandoned my Pokemon Go content. And I actually got a sick Squirtle Squad video coming up soon too, so if you want to know about that, then make sure to subscribe to the Swag Man.